All right, hi everyone. We have a small we have a small group here, which means that there's probably going to be more time for discussion and Q&A, and just talking about the potential of this exciting new technology for us. Um, I'm gonna spend a bit of time talking about using ChatGPT in K-12 education before our breakout room. But before I do that, maybe I'll just give a bit of context of where I am and kind of like my journey after Hugsy. I'm with a company called AdMaker. We're based in Singapore, but we have offices in India and the US. Now our vision is we focus on empowering educators to promote a maker culture. And what that means looks different for different people, I know, but for us, a maker culture is necessarily enabled by technology, all right? And it's done so that every child has access to a brighter future. So like to help them realize the potential, we need to equip them with the skills they need to be creative makers using technology, not just consumers of technology, but be able to effectively create new stuff, right, with the help of technology. And as a maker-first company, our perspective on emerging technology, including ChatGPT, is driven by 4 principles. We look a lot about discovery learning. Instead of spoon-feeding students with information, right, we help them acquire knowledge by themselves. And that's reflected in how we encourage students of an appropriate developmental age to tinker with ChatGPT, to push the boundaries, right, to discover its kind of like constraints and the problem space. Iterative design and fabrication, so the opportunity to tinker, to experiment, to problem solve, the idea that failure is okay. You learn through your failures and you learn through your experiences. Focusing a lot also on collaboration and connection. So these are things that I think are not new to most of us, right? Collaboration is important in the workplace, but collaboration is also important in terms of sharing your creations with the world. And like I mentioned just now, all of this is undergirded by STEM. All of this is undergirded by using emerging tech, right? Okay, I'm gonna skip this. Okay, so maybe just to put ChatGPT into perspective, we see it as on this continuum of maker education, right? From a fully analog one, which is like cardboard prototyping, lo-fi kind of prototyping, all the way to fully digital. And we see ChatGPT as an emergent maker technology in the fully digital realm, where students actually can use ChatGPT as a co-pilot to help them come up with even more exciting and even more like new things, right, in the course of their work. But before I do that, maybe I'll just give a brief overview of what ChatGPT is, right? And I think most of us already know this here. Most of us see ChatGPT as software where you key in a question, right, and it comes up with an answer, right? And this is what I actually asked ChatGPT, right? What are you? How do you work, right? ChatGPT actually is able to look at the context as well as the meaning of the query, recognize patterns within the query, and then use these patterns to generate a response, right? They're able to recognize patterns because it's trained on a certain amount of set of data, which is basically all the text that's freely available on the internet. And by recognizing patterns in the query that you're asking, they're able to generate a response that makes semantic as well as, well, semantic sense, right? So when I asked what ChatGPT is, it answered, I'm ChatGPT, a large language model. I'm designed to respond to natural language queries and generate human-like text. When I asked it how it works, it gives me a paragraph. And then when I ask it to simplify it, right, it's able to simplify the language. So I think there was one question about how similar or different it is to Google. So as far as I'm aware, Google is not able to speak in natural language, right? So ChatGPT actually answers in natural language, which can be a little uncanny for some of us. It's able to come up with, say, songs, limericks, pieces of literature even, and it's able to simplify complex statements, right? And throughout this short presentation, I'm going to show you a bit about what it can do and what it can't do, right? But just I mean, we have more people coming in. Can I just invite you to quickly put one if you've actually played around with ChatGPT, and then two if you've never tried it, just for me to get a sense of where everyone is. So in the chat window, one is if you have tried it in whatever context, and two is if you never tried it. Cool, we have a mix. Okay. All right. So I don't know if we'll have actual time to devote to actually trying it, but hopefully through my short sharing, you'll have an idea of what the potential is. And after this, well, maybe not tonight, it's getting late. Tomorrow, in your free time, in between classes, you can go on ChatGPT to kind of like probe it and test the boundaries of what it can and can't do. Now, when it comes to K-12 education, I understand there's been a lot of discussion there, and I think people are still struggling to try to classify the use cases. The way I see it is that ChatGPT has two broad use cases, right? It can be used by students, or it can be used by education professionals. When it's used by education professionals like teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, it can be used to improve teaching and learning. For example, to generate differentiated assignments for students of different profiles, as well as to reduce that administrative burden. For example, to automate the generation of personalized letters, or to help write student testimonials, for instance, by keying in raw data. Now, a lot of the second domain, which is to have students themselves use it, is not that well explored, right? I think it can be used by students to help deepen their understanding. For example, to help them generate and critique ChatGPT's output. But this domain isn't that well explored yet, right? Online, we see teachers, bloggers actually talk a lot about it. But in terms of actually trying out in a classroom, research on using in a classroom, it's not well explored yet. And I think it's understandable why that's the case, right? A lot of teachers and a lot of lecturers, especially in higher education, are super concerned with the incidents of cheating or plagiarism involving ChatGPT. There have been knee-jerk reactions on banning it, right? From New York City as well as other school districts around the US. And these concerns are not unfounded, I feel. Even in OpenAI's kind of like privacy terms and conditions policy, which you have to accept in order to use ChatGPT, it says you must be 18 or older. Although I have colleagues who emailed OpenAI to clarify, and then OpenAI replied back in an email saying, between 13 and 18, it's recommended that students use it with the consent of an adult, with the consent of their parents or their guardian. But still, this is kind of like murky, right? But why I think it's still important to grapple with this problem is, I don't know, I mean, at least when I was at Huxley, we were taught to, or it was a place where we discussed this like boundary pushing and new ideas in education, with the knowledge that these technologies are widely available to students. Even if you ban them, they're going to access it at home. It's just putting a band-aid over the problem, right? And what what I was thinking is, if you use it with intention in the classroom, it actually has the potential to enhance teaching and deepen your understanding of content. And that's kind of like a longer term view of the solution instead of like putting a quick fix, right? Now, the big question is how do you do this, right? So I'm going to spend the rest of my time that I have sharing some ideas about how we can use ChatGPT with our students, right, to enhance and deepen their learning. So the way I see it, right, and I think as practitioners, I'm always thinking about how to help teachers use it with their students, right? I see it as a 4-step process. You can see at the bottom of my slides here, the first step is assess learner profiles, set ground rules, think about the integration, ChatGPT integration, And then for the long term, you can think about having thinking routines, right? Thinking routines help to routinize and help to, I guess, make it a habit, right? Make using ChatGPT in a certain way a habit in the classroom. But right from the start, before you do all of that, you have to assess your learner profiles, right? So students need to be cognitively ready to use ChatGPT. I think in my conversations with teachers around the world, the general consensus is it's more suitable for secondary school students or like upper middle school, high school students, because using ChatGPT requires them to understand a little bit of like how it works underneath the hood in order to understand its limitations. And it might not be that developmentally appropriate for elementary school students. So that's the first cut, right? But on top of that, I think it's important to go with any open-ended technology. With any open-ended technology, it's important to go into a classroom, understanding that your students already have a positive classroom culture. So think about how your students are reacting or relating to each other. What's the kind of classroom climate? With any open-ended technology with disruptive potential, and I use this word disruptive, right, in a couple of ways. Of course, it's disruptive because it's new, it's paradigm shifting, but as I think all the teachers will know, disruptive also means that it can literally disrupt the lesson, right? So I think you want to build that positive classroom culture as a way to reinforce that we're going to be using this new technology in exciting ways where we have to be respectful when we use it too. The third kind of like third way I would kind of assess the profiles on whether they're ready is to actually use it in the classroom, right? So I would actually just, if I were still teaching in front of students, I would just open up ChatGPT. I will ask them to, what do you want to find out today? What's something that's on your mind? And I would literally just type that into ChatGPT, right? And of course, based on student responses and like a conversation of, based on student responses, you can easily segue into a deeper conversation about how the platform works, the opportunities that it has, as well as the possible pitfalls, right? So the first time you use it should be as a teacher demonstration. That helps the students that piques their curiosity, but it still puts control of the technology in your hands for now, as you try to establish whether students are ready to take up or to use this technology. Then I think for learners, it's also important to set ground rules, right? So that they don't run amok with this new thing, right? So with other emerging technologies that we have actually deployed in classrooms, we've realized that setting ground rules is super important. And for ChatGPT, we see four different buckets of rules that are important, right? The first one is about data privacy. So all the information that you're putting into ChatGPT is going to be used as training data for OpenAI. And I think students have to know that, right? And students also have to know not to give sensitive data or things that they wouldn't tell, like basic sensitive data should not be put into OpenAI. OpenAI claims that they have they routinely purge kind of like user data, but I mean, just to be safe, it's always good to let students know that whatever they're typing into ChatGPT might still be around 5 or 10 years from now, right? Similar to how posting something on social media can still be around. The second bucket of ground rules are around respectful use. And so respectful use can mean two things, right? Respectful in terms of how we relate with students in the classroom. So that could be things like use ChatGPT in ways that actually support, in using kind ways, right? Don't use it to support antisocial behaviors or even worse, illegal behaviors, right? But respectful also in the sense of not just pro-social, but also respectful to the learning environment. And this is where you can bring in talks about plagiarism and cheating, and how actually if you use ChatGPT, it's not just disrespectful to the teacher, it's also disrespecting the learning environment. So when you address the prospect of cheating, when you address the prospect of like using or abusing this technology upfront, right? You are able to engage students in a conversation early instead of, I guess, putting it in the sand and pretending it doesn't exist, only to have to confront this issue later on. The third bucket of rules involve hallucinations and biases, and this is a key limitation of ChatGPT. If you read some of the literature, I think it's quite established by now that when there isn't enough information about a topic, ChatGPT can make stuff up. So let me give an example, right? In Singapore, so the history of Singapore is not as well written about as the history of the US, for instance. Now, one of my colleagues who is a history teacher in Singapore asked ChatGPT to give him 5 sources about this historical event that happened in Singapore. And ChatGPT gave 5 primary sources that it made up. These sources were not in the literature, and when he asked ChatGPT, can you cite them? Can you give me actual citations of the primary sources? The platform was unable to, and actually it apologized and said oh, I'm sorry that I made up stuff, blah blah blah. But the point is that students need to know that these hallucinations can happen, and they need to know to double check the information that ChatGPT is giving them. Biases are a little bit different. So I think anyone who works with AI is well aware that AI is only as reliable as the training data it's being given. And these biases can lead to certain, I guess, biases against historically disenfranchised groups, right? So students also need to know that these biases can occur and how to spot these biases. And the last bit is that rubbish in, rubbish out is basically that if you give, if you don't ask the right questions, ChatGPT isn't going to give you the right answer. So if students are going to see it as a cure-all to all of their homework, that's hardly the point. The point is that you still have to put in some effort into crafting the right prompts, into asking ChatGPT the right questions in order for the platform to give you an answer that's going to be insightful, right? So I think these 4 buckets of ground rules are weighty, but they pretty much lay the ground for subsequent engagement with ChatGPT. So teachers looking to use this in a classroom should probably actually engage in these discussions with their students first. I'm going to spend a bit of time. How much? Oh, wow. It's already 25. I'm going to spend the next maybe 10 minutes talking about the last 2 bits, ChatGPT integration and thinking routines. I'm going to give maybe just one example of integration before going on to thinking routines. And I'm going to show you how we can actually use ChatGPT to enhance a couple of activities on different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I'm going to use this example, right? So explain Bohr's planetary model of the atom and its implications. Basically, this is quite a conceptual, this is quite a high level conceptual question. I'm not a science teacher, but science teachers I talk to are well, this is a pretty conceptual question, right? That sometimes learners struggle to understand. And if you ask ChatGPT straight up, explain the planetary model of the atom and its implications, it'll give you 4 paragraphs of text, which as an adult, even I don't understand, right? But if you add a suffix, right? If you modify the prompt to say explain the planetary model of the atom and its implications in a way that a 16-year-old can understand, then you see that the language is more simplified, right? They give analogies it's like a tiny solar system where the nucleus of the atom is like the sun. So they simplify the language, and this is useful for students who A, maybe younger, of course, but B, they're English language learners. So they're able to explain complex topics in simpler language. For students who still may have problems, you can actually ask the platform to actually use a humorous analogy. And this reminds me of this whole idea that analogies are actually powerful tools for teaching and learning, because they help to simplify at first, but as the learner grows and develops, they're able to identify areas where the analogy might be insufficient. So identifying areas where the analogy is incomplete. But analogies are still super like useful to help conceptual understanding of a subject. So ChatGPT is able to give some of these analogies, right, which might be able to help students understand. And then it can also give a limerick, right? This is less helpful in teaching and learning, but this is just fun, right? For student engagement. It can write a limerick that's like half decent. So my point in these two slides is that given the right prompts, ChatGPT is able to actually explain a complex topic in simpler language and even using analogies. So that whole idea of identifying and scoping the prompt that you ask him, that you ask ChatGPT, not him, is called prompt engineering. So if you're interested, there's a lot of resources that you can read up about prompt engineering, which I also include at the end of this set of slides. I have another example, which is an essay question, but I'm going to leave this in this deck of slides when I upload it later on. Might not have the time to go through it in too much detail, but it broadly involves using ChatGPT as a research database to help generate points for students, and then later on to give feedback based on a certain set of rubrics, right? Give feedback to your students. Students can actually input the essay that they have written using Google Docs onto ChatGPT, have a set of rubrics out, have a set of assessment criteria, and ChatGPT can do a very simple first cut, which they can actually use to write a second draft of their essay. But I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because I want to save a bit more time for the last bit and the rest of this webinar. I think a lot of teachers think about ChatGPT integration in terms of, how can I use it in this one way, in this discrete way? How can I use it to help students understand a topic, right? Or assess their written work? What I think is helpful also to look at are about thinking routines, because having students use ChatGPT just once or twice in a lesson might be helpful, but what's even more powerful is to give them the skills to think about ChatGPT and have them use it, right? Even without prompting, right? To help them in their studies and in their work. And when all students in this day and age where many students have one-to-one devices, this is something that's really on the horizon that we have to grapple with. So getting students familiar with thinking routines can be another way of helping them use the technology in more responsible and more productive means. So Sarah Dillard actually suggests one way to use it, right? And then she says, think, pair, ChatGPT, pair, and share. So riffing off that, one way to actually amplify existing thinking routines is to insert ChatGPT in between think, pair, share. And I'd love to hear if you guys try in your lessons. One way to do it is to, after you pair where words, in the pair stage of think, pair, share, there's the opportunity for students to elaborate on points with their peer, to calibrate their own response, to see, oh, what's my response? Kind of like where did it stand? Was it completely off tangent, or is it somewhat relevant? And you help the students socialize and kind of like understand what other people think about a prompt. But you can use ChatGPT to further that exchange, to ask ChatGPT a question that's related to the conversation. So in the conversation, maybe a pair has a question that comes up that they don't know how to answer, right? They could just key that in the ChatGPT and then discuss their response for another 2 minutes. So you could say, pair for 1 minute, come up with a question that you still don't agree on or still have left, key in the ChatGPT and discuss on that response for another 1 or 2 minutes, right? And that kind of discussion can be helpful to open up new boundaries that weren't like explored before, right? Before you move into that big group sharing. So this is one way to use ChatGPT in a thinking routine. Another way, which I just came out with, I used to teach humanities in Singapore. I used to teach English and history. And one thing my students always had, a problem that they always had was in doing research, right? A lot of times they thought of research as just going on Google or Wikipedia and just copying chunks of text. Now with ChatGPT, that's gonna not be a problem on one level, but another problem, they're different. On another level, there are different problems to tackle, right? So if I were in a classroom, I would introduce a routine like this, right? Ask, simplify, critique, cite, research. That would take the place of doing historical research, that would take the place of researching for an essay, where essentially the first thing you do is ask, right? They could ask ChatGPT, for example. So this is a topic a history topic in Singapore, why Germany lost during World War II. It's a big historical question. And asking that in ChatGPT is going to give you like a huge, it's going to give you a long reply, which may or may not be very helpful, right? But then after that, you might get students to simplify their prompt, right? To pare the language down to something that you can understand. To critique, to see the other perspective, right? So to ask ChatGPT, what are some other reasons that you haven't mentioned above in your initial answer, right? Why do some people disagree with the points that you've mentioned above, right? And then asking ChatGPT to cite, right? I think if you ask ChatGPT to cite, it will come up with some citations, which in the last step, the students can use to research in greater depth. So to take those cited resources and really just key them into Google and see if these resources are legit and are actually existing. So this is like a brief framework that we have for thinking routines. And the benefit of having these thinking routines is that it helps to make the process systematic for students. And it helps to bake in a kind of the research process on ChatGPT, right? And you also see that this thinking routine is a way of prompt layering, which is asking ChatGPT subsequent prompts, right? In ChatGPT, it's as if you're talking to a human being. You ask it a question, it gives you an answer. You ask it a question, it gives you an answer. And the questions you ask it also draw from its previous answers within the same chat window. So that's how you can layer on more prompts in order to help students deepen their level of questioning with ChatGPT. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much what I have now. Well, I thought we could do something. Well, I've been talking for a while. I want to give everyone a chance to kind of talk and discuss on these points. I'm gonna maybe give Rofan, can we help to set up maybe breakout rooms? Let's have we're gonna spend a bit of time in breakout rooms of 4 to 5 4 to 5 students, 4 to 5 individuals per room. And I have a couple of scenarios that I want you guys to think about. The first scenario is that you suspect a student is cheating on a writing assignment. How would you address it? And scenario 2 is the first time that your students have the chance to use ChatGPT in your lessons. How would you introduce the tool to them? All right. So it could be either scenario, but honestly, if you're not excited about either scenario, I invite you to discuss about anything that I've mentioned in this presentation so far. We're going to spend 7 minutes on a breakout discussion. And then when we get back, I'm going to invite each group to maybe just share what they were discussing about, just to hear from everyone so that we can also learn. Rofan, can you help us with the breakout? I think we have enough for like 2 breakout rooms.
Yeah, we have 2 breakouts. Do you want me to assign the room, or people choose the room they want to go in?
Yeah, let's let people pick. That's fine.
Oh, okay.
So I guess if you're interested in talking about scenario 1, you go to breakout room 1. If you're interested in scenario 2, you breakout room 2. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can go in the room you're interested in.
Okay.
So what I can see, we are not much and people are joining room 1. So there is no point me joining room 2. So
Well, I'll join room 2 if you're interested.
All right, I'll be there. Sure.
I'll go to room 2. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. Okay.
Do you want to join one of the room? I'm replying a message and then I will be joined.
Thank you for taking this initiative of doing this separate breakout room just for me. I think I feel really good about that.
No, I mean, I think both of these questions are like super important for people to grapple with. I just wish we had more time because I mean, right, at MIT Media Lab, there's a whole course right on this, and then today we only have an hour, but yes, we do. Hi,
True.
welcome back.
Oh yeah, I don't know why I send off. Yeah, people are coming back.
That's fine. Wait a while for her. We had 9 participants, so someone's like missing. But maybe we can go ahead and I'll go ahead and start first. So I think we had a pretty good discussion in both breakout rooms. Can I invite maybe a representative from each room to just give a very brief overview of what the discussion was centered around? Maybe I'll invite someone from the first breakout room first.
Okay, I could go.
Yeah, please.
So we're talking about how, someone mentioned in our group of how she gave an assignment, and within some few minutes the students selected like the one that you required to write like some text, and she immediately pointed out that, oh, this is ChatGPT, and I really did not get like the outcome of the whole situation, but I think we've gotten to the stage in life generally where the whole essence of technology is to make life easier, right? So one of the suggestions that we came up in the group is whenever we could give students assignments, right, and even encourage them to use ChatGPT to do the assignments and everything. However, if we really want to grade the students, the grading of the students should be based on their presentations in class, or if we're trying to give them, like, tell them to write about a particular thing, these things should be written in class and not in an assignment. So basically, every assessment should be in person and not a homework. But when it comes to research-based, we should encourage them to use ChatGPT and all that stuff. So that's kind of like the feedback from our group.
Oh, you're on mute,
Yeah,
Terence.
I realized. Yeah, and that's exactly what I think we're talking about when we say, well, we as teachers, we have a responsibility of delineating like when it's appropriate to use the technology and when it isn't, and then to articulate that rationale clearly to our students. So like you mentioned, research is okay, but for the sake of assessment, we want to see how you're writing independently and working independently on a piece of work. And I think assessment modalities and assessment formats will tend towards that. So thanks for sharing. Yeah, that was quite interesting. How about someone from so I was in second scenario group. Sneha, Joe, either one of
I
you
can
wanna
explain.
please.
Sure. Thank you so much. Okay, so if I have to introduce my students, I think my approach would be never to say that, ChatGPT is a wrong thing, because it is not, and it is already out in the market and we cannot step back now. So one very important idea that Terence shared, that we need to learn how to give the prompts. So the idea of ask, then simplify, critique, cite, and research, I think that path is a very good path to learn up to teach the students if it is a homework. But there must be a way in the classroom where a student is writing an essay or anything without using technology, because both the aspects are very important. And even how to use ChatGPT mindfully is also very important, because they should not be totally dependent on that. So I was thinking on my head that instead of using searching something about from 10 different Google search, I am getting the answer from one ChatGPT platform. That is the only difference I could see. But what Terence shared, the pathway that asks, simplify, critique, cite, and research, I think that was very helpful for us as an educator to teach the students that how to use ChatGPT at all. But there must be a mechanism to test without technology too.
Yeah, thanks, Sneha. And I think this reminded me of, I think there's this whole like Project Heroes teaching for understanding framework. And one of the elements of the teaching for understanding framework is the performances of understanding, right? So how do you curate these? How do you design these performances of understanding to actually reflect genuine conceptual understanding of a topic? How do you do performances of understanding that are authentic, right? That are relatable to students, but also like test what they're supposed to test, right? And I think a lot of teachers are being forced to grapple with that. How do I reconfigure or redefine my assignments in order to reckon with, right? I guess reckon with the presence of ChatGPT. And that's also something that I saw coming up in the first breakout group. So it's interesting to see those connections. I'm very aware of time, and I have we still have one part to wrap up this whole thing. And I think it's going to be a very interesting sharing. I've shared a bit about how students can use it in the classroom. My friend and colleague here, Joe, is going to talk about how teachers can use it. And he's going to share with us a very, it's a bot, a program that he and his team all made up of teachers in Singapore who are doing this on a volunteer basis, how they've come up with a program for teachers to more effectively and efficiently use ChatGPT in the classroom. So I'm going to hand some time over to Joe. Joe, please.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. So anyways, just a very quick one. I'm a teacher actually I was teaching for about 10 years, more than 10 years really. So one day I actually asked my students, like, what if one day you could download all the information in your brain? Will you need a teacher anymore? What is our role as educators? And I think that question was given to my students was like more than 6-7 years ago. I think the technology is here. And I feel that today with Google, with ChatGPT now even more, that the role of teacher really has really diminished in terms of like sharing information. So for myself, so I'm a computer science graduate. So I have been playing around with what they code program and machine learning, and I think lately I've developed this bot called ChatGPT. Okay, so ChatGPT came about a few weeks, I think just less than 2 months ago. And actually, this bot was inspired by ChatGPT because the word "cher" is actually comes from teacher, CHER. And in Singapore, a lot of the students, they, instead of calling Mr. so and so, they will say "cher, cher, cher, cher," you know. So it's like kind of a very common word that is used for Singapore students to call their teachers, "cher." Okay, short form for teacher. So just to share a bit with you the bot. So the bot came about. This is the program actually. So if you're, this is the very first version, and so if I click on this, it has just a simple bot, "Hi, how are you?" and things like that. So this bot came about, was developed from using the API for OpenAI, and what it does is it's just like ChatGPT, but it's just in a web base. And the only difference between this and a ChatGPT actually is this teacher, where the teachers can go in and actually look at information. So if I'm a teacher here, I'll just I'll key in and I can download all the data. So never mind, I'll just yeah. So here it is. I'll just show you. So this was developed, and I can see all the data that the students are actually using. So you can see that these are the kind of questions that the students are using, and these are the answers. So this was developed really as kind of a test bed for what students are actually talking and what is the responses and things like that. So the good thing about this was that it has been, I think we have over 10,000 responses, conversational data. And we have about over 80 teachers who's using this. So currently, this is in other, this is version 1. So I just give you a little bit of history. So this ChatGPT actually was originally intended for the exposure of teachers and students to use like this ChatGPT. So originally it was developed by one of my colleague called Kahal, and he did it with a Telegram bot. So the bot itself, it's using Telegram. I'm sure you all know what Telegram is. It's like the WhatsApp, but and then it has this bot where you can ask questions and you will just use the API and you will answer the questions. And the conversational data actually was recorded in Google Sheets, and all the teachers will be able to actually see what the students are asking. So I came on board about a month later, and I told him, hey, let me develop the web version for you. And so that was the web version, which you can see earlier on, which we can actually download all the different data and things like that. So right now, I've developed a new version called version 2. So this is actually version 2. So the version 2 data of this, I call it a virtual learning assistant, actually is a more improved version of the ChatGPT, where I actually developed to be able to, so I'll just do a quick demo. Okay. So what it does, it actually create this word cloud for all what kind of data that so for all my class, I can see that so this is the conversational data for the class. This is what they are talking about. So there's some key points here. And okay, so this is a demo. In the future, we are looking into developing the sentiments for all the conversational, whether it's positive, neutral, and negative. Yeah. Knowledge map. If you, this is one thing that I also recently has developed. So for example, I put plants, right? And I can kind of use the API, which actually at back end is also using ChatGPT to generate this mind map. So a lot of students are actually like, if they want to know more about certain things, so you can type anything you want. So for example, say earthquakes, something like that. Okay. All right. And you can even generate, and it will generate all the points for it. So using a particular syntax. Oops, sorry. I guess it doesn't have. So let me try another one. Cells. Earthquake. Yeah, there you go. So it will generate a lot of. It can generate as many kind of different types of knowledge map to help students learn better. So the syntax that you see here on the right is actually generated by ChatGPT. So in a sense, I have been so-called modifying the response to extract this syntax. So this is how cool ChatGPT can be in a sense. So I use a lot of prompt engineering behind this to actually generate such things. The other one that is also assessing myself is you are able to record yourself to say that I'm talking about friends. And so I can say, hi, I'm a primary 1 student. I like my friends. My friends are good. I want to be friends with them forever. My good friend is David, right? So what it does, it actually can play back. Yeah, and using AI, it actually try to transcribe, and then it will give a feedback. That's a lovely sentiment to make it sound more properly. Try saying I'm a primary 1 student and I have many good friends, such my friends, I hope to be friends. So these are what, to me, helps students really learn So yeah, so currently this is the second prototype of it. Okay. So yeah, so right now, myself, I'm actually exploring a few things. Merging AIs, which is like, if you heard of Wolfram and Alpha, is the what they call it. It's a very a lot of logic behind it, which ChatGPT cannot. So actually, there is even a website that allows you to play around with it, called Hugging Face. I can send these slides to you. Right now, also looking at conversational language to access curated documents. So instead of ChatGPT generating nonsense, I can put in my own curated documents, and using conversational data, I'm able to find things. Of course, I'll use conversational chatbot to support lower grades. You know, like I'm a primary school teacher, and I know that primary school students love to ask questions, and sometimes the teacher is very busy attending to one. So it's good to always, we want to encourage the kind of questioning. So I hope to come out with a kind of a chatbot to allow students to always ask questions and always be answered according to what kind of questions will be answered through this chatbot. Yeah. Okay, any questions before I finish my final thoughts and things like that?
I feel like that's really interesting, and definitely all the data collected from this platform can be used to study other construction students, like how students like correlate them with students' performances in classes or other motivations or belonging, and to see whether there are relationships there. It'd be helpful, like very interesting for researchers in the educational psychology field to study it.
Yeah. So if you are all interested, you can also drop me a message, and I can always let you explore. But the only thing is you have to use your own open AI API key. That's something that you need to extract. Yeah. So currently this tool is kind of available for our teachers to use. Just to say that because we are a community of teachers, this tool is actually belongs to this community of teachers, which is not part of MOE and things like that. So yeah, so we have a bit more freedom to kind of explore and really try different things. Yeah. So
I just have one
yes.
question. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So how do you track the students' use? I saw that history was, you could see
Okay.
students.
So
Yeah.
So coming back to this, when I look at the dashboard, so initially when this ChatGPT came about, we didn't want to track who was saying what. Yeah, I think it was really to allow the students to keep saying, keep expressing themselves. So we use it based on a class. So we give you a class code, you enter the class code, then it's a collation of the whole entire class
Got it.
conversational data. But also there are also teachers who actually ask like, oh, can we have students' name? So for this version, we allow students to put in their names, and so that they can actually talk.
So
So
students
even
are
the new
using
chat,
this platform rather than using the ChatGPT OpenAI.
they can. So if
Got it.
I mean, yeah, because the ChatGPT OpenAI, number one, it's you need to sign up for an account. So there's a bit of a hassle. Two, the traffic is quite heavy. So sometimes you don't really get all the information and things like that. For this is a bit more targeted. So that there's certain use. So I find that it's really a specific use for it. Like generating the knowledge map, assessing myself. If I were to converse, and then it can transcribe. And from transcribe, it can tell you like, oh, how are you doing? What should you do better? And things like that. Yeah. So
is this available for teachers to use free of cost, or is it how much is it as a future teacher?
Okay, so currently it's available at no charge. The only thing is you have to do is to get an OpenAI key. So you know, in ChatGPT there's this API key. This API key at this stage is, I think they give you $18 credit up to 3 months, and after you finish using it, you have to pay for it. So it depends on the traffic that you are actually using. So far for me, when I'm using it, I'm still in the free tier for the next 1 or 2 months. Yeah. If you're interested, why don't you drop me an email? I can give you my email, and you can just let me know if you're interested, and I can get you into this, or you can ask Terrence. We'll put you into the Discord thing. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, you can try it and things. I'm looking for people to try anyways. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yes.
my question is, I'm no longer in the classroom. Even I'm thinking of probably going back from a very high point of view. But my question is this also, you said this is connected to like the whole ChatGPT, but just that it's kind of like a niche thing?
So this is connected to, okay, so just if you go to OpenAI, there is this API that they give you here, right? So if you look at this API, and so this API allows me to connect to ChatGPT to get the so-called the chatbot. That means I can interface with it to create like a conversational chatbot. Yeah. So in fact, if you know some basic, okay, I wouldn't say basic. If you know some programming, you can actually connect. There are a lot of articles on Medium that gives you this, allows you to run a website and connect with it to create your own chatbot. Yeah. So yeah, so from there you can actually extract the message, the response, and from the response you can kind of like break it down into whatever information you need. So like for the knowledge map, which I showed you earlier on, what I did was I have built in a prompt to ask for a particular syntax called plant UML syntax. And from here, I can generate the syntax and let it appear here, and I can generate the map. Yeah. So actually, I find that it's a lot of prompt engineering that goes behind a lot of the tools today that use AI, especially ChatGPT, to make it, yeah, because if not, it's nothing more than just a conversational chatbot. But to me, because it's very generative, it is not very accurate sometimes. And I think I struggle myself, especially when I'm doing a lot of coding to develop this, right? By the way, I use ChatGPT to develop this website. I would say 70% of the code is done by ChatGPT, but I would say even 30% of it is not accurate. Yeah. So yeah, I use a lot of API, which is like those application protocol interface, which allows me to generate a lot of things, especially the transcribing. When I say something, how it can transcribe to words and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, if you're interested, yeah, can should I go through,
Joe,
Terrence?
I think what's helpful is after this session, I think Rofan, we'll send out an email. We'll send out an email to all participants, and we'll include our contact details. We'll include a recording to this webinar also. But thanks Joe, thanks so much for sharing. I think that's a very good compliment to our earlier discussion about what teachers need to do in order to set the groundwork for using ChatGPT in classroom. And this is from the technical standpoint, how students can actually use it in more, I guess, effective ways. And for teachers to track that learning, for teachers to be able to track that learning, I think that's something that we don't see widely yet. I think we are pretty much. I think most people have left, but thank you so much for staying all the way. I will share with everyone this recording, as well as how to get in touch with us. And I think thank you so much for a short but very, very informative session. Yeah, if there are any questions, please feel free to share with us, or if you got to go, we understand that as well.
Could you share the slides in the email as well?
Sure, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you
Good
for
night.
coming.